To have a good harvest, one must plant good seeds and must also use the right kind of fertilizer. The carrots have grown large and firm. How good they will taste.
Well, good morning, gardeners and homesteaders and everybody else that's just joining us. We are here to talk about something very special, and I've just been notified that Miss Batavia has not eaten yet, so it should be an interesting show, just to say the least. Was I not supposed to say that out loud?
I didn't think you would. I can't be held responsible for the next 59 minutes. I'm normally better prepared than this. I'm over the threshold of I haven't eaten.
Oh boy. Hangry. So we're going to talk about different varieties this year or different seed varieties and understanding when to use them, because it can get kind of complicated, and no pun intended. Actually, I don't even know if it's a pun, but it's easy to get lost in the weeds with it. So we're going to try and crack that shell, which I think will be a good thing. It's been very enlightening. I've spent a lot of time this year really looking at different varieties and testing them out and stuff like that. So, and I know Miss Batavia's got varieties out the wazoo in her garden. So,
add to the list of to-dos for this winter. I'm so sad to even say that this is where we are. Start making your list of things you're going to do in the off season.
It is bad.
But I need to go through my seeds because I have so many of the same type of vegetable.
Yeah.
But the variety of that vegetable differs. And I'm not easily able to kind of get to what I want to and what I need to. It's kind of like just a whole container of broccoli. That's what I got.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I think in this subject, we'll talk about hybrid and heirlooms, stuff like that. If you're not a regular watcher on Sandy Bottom Homestead, which is my YouTube channel, first of all, you should be. But I've been talking a lot about that this year, and I'm testing out to see which ones will produce and stuff like that. And there's specific cases for specific things, and it does get kind of technical, but I'm a technical guy. You know what I mean? I think it's the information's in the data. You just got to, figure it out and just go with it. And I think once we learn to make these educated decisions and not just go off of pictures, which I know I'm guilty of, being like, ooh, that tomato picture looked good. I'm going to try that one. And start really digging down a little bit deeper, I think we can be even better than we already are. And I say we as a collective audience and everything.
I know we can. And this isn't like some type of imposter syndrome. I'm not trying to, I'm not afraid to succeed. This isn't that. I don't want to give the attention to some of these things that I feel like I would need to. I think the answers are at our fingertips for a lot of the troubles we have.
Yeah.
A lot of the curiosities we have. I think that fingertips, as if whether it's on a seed package, whether it's on a website, I think the information is there. And I think because oftentimes we can have probably quite a bit of success without digging in, it's super easy to not. But this is what this conversation is. We're digging in, right?
Yeah. We're going to dig in deep. And also what we do need to dig in deep on is just let everybody know that if you would like to support the show and help keep us on the air, please do so by either checking our links, going to Patreon, Apple subscriptions, and subscribing, or one thing that you can just do out of the goodness of your heart is share this episode or any other one with 3 other gardeners that you know. Boom. So, are you big in... I'm trying to think of how to kick it off. Are you big into what variety you're growing or what the produce looks like when you pick it? Be honest.
The produce looks...
Like by the picture when you order it.
Yeah, I'll save the moment of being offended. Yeah, with your whole be honest, as if, of course I'm honest. What it looks like.
Yeah.
I mean, there's something there are not a lot of things, but there's some things where, because of my previous experience of growing it, even if it doesn't look great, I am all for it. Right. But a lot of the things, for vegetables, it's going to be what the produce looks like.
Yeah.
You know, there's not a lot. I mean, there's some variegated leaves on some plants that I think are kind of sexy. But, you know, the plant itself isn't the thing. It's definitely, oh, wow, look at that head of cauliflower.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Like I've been growing the purple cauliflower for years because I just like the way it looks. I mean, it cooks white. But I say be honest because I do the same thing, or I have done the same thing in the past, where I look at it, I'm like, oh, I want to see that in my garden. And I go, and that's where I stop. And it's hard to kind of admit, because then if I go back and look, I can think of a handful of those where it'd be like, no, I definitely failed at that. Like, didn't even get anything close to what it looked like. Just total bad experience. So it's, you know, for me, it can be hard to admit that I did something like that. And I know that it's really common because that's what marketing is all about. You know, show the pretty vegetable, and we automatically think that, well, that's what we're going to get, when in fact, that's probably not always the case, especially depending on where you live.
Yeah, I don't know what the split is, but there's also the earlies, you know, like insert the early peas, you know, early producing things. So when those varieties hit, it doesn't really matter what they look like. I'm inclined, because I think that I'm, you know, I feel like I have the shortest garden season ever. I absolutely don't. Shout out to those in zones 3 and 4, right? But I look at it and say, okay, yeah, I want that. You know, I want something to produce earlier, you know? So I think those are probably neck and neck when it comes to, I'm going to increase this number throughout the episode. What the thing looks like notes about early producers, and then almost anything from a trusted resource that they're saying they have tried and they replaced something that they had problems with.
Yeah.
So when someone says, oh, wait, you know, I'm growing this variety of collards now because the cabbage moth, you know, is resistant to it. You know, sign me up for all of the packages of seeds.
Yeah.
You know? Is there a bridge you're selling to? You know?
Well, you know, when I see a pack of seeds that says early on it, you know, my first thought is like, oh, well, the plant doesn't even have to grow. Like, it's just going to start producing right away. You know, for some reason in my head, it clicks like that. Like, oh, I'm going to get this tomato so much more early. And it'll be earlier, but what, a week? I mean, can you not wait a week? You know, and then a lot of times what happens with me in my garden is I'll get one of those early producing varieties, but they produce earlier, but not as long. So I end up missing the boat on that, you know? So it's like, it's this real difficult balance. And it's hard because I want to get it as soon as possible because I'm impatient. But the older I get, the more that I learn that patience is what's going to get me through my garden every year.
Yeah, everything that glitters isn't gold. I think we may have disagreed on this a bit, but some of these varieties that are bred to do certain things, sometimes you lose out on taste. So I know everyone here has heard of the Early Girl, and I think there's even an Early Boy, but Early Girl tomato. I'd
definitely grow the Early Boy then.
When I used to buy tomato transplants, I still buy a ton of transplants, but when I used to buy tomato transplants, I would buy an Early Girl because it made sense to me. Why wouldn't I want a tomato early? And even when I started starting tomato plants from seed, I bought Early Girl seeds, and I planted both purchased transplants and transplants from my, grow room. And I've never been really thrilled or really impressed by the Early Girl. I feel like my memory says that, yeah, those tomatoes came a little bit earlier. Don't know how much, but it's kind of like, it's not as bad as a tomato you're going to get from the grocery store.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I'd say oh, it's really good,
Yeah, that's, I don't know if I go along with the taste part of it. I can't quantify that either direction, but, I know that when I asked you to send me some tomato seeds before for like 2 years, all I got was Early Girl tomatoes. So you clearly had a couple extra packs laying around.
That was like 2 years ago. One.
Yeah.
Two, I wouldn't do that to you now. Right? Like my opinion is firm and set on the Early Girl.
And what is that opinion?
I don't see a reason to grow it in my garden, which reminds me, the big boy. I have one tomato that I need to get out and harvest, and it rained today, so I hope that it stays. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is like,
Yeah.
You know, big boy tomato. I have seeds for that too. I'm kind of like, you know, I don't know that it's that special. Which, you know, is that whole hybrid versus heirloom too. There's a bit of that in there too.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that real quick, and then we'll move on to the varieties. Let's get that one out of the way. So, hybrids are seeds that have been cross-pollinated with others in order to kind of stabilize the best traits from each plant. So you might get disease resistance, you might get different tolerances to temperature, you might get, you know, all these different things. The big downfall to them is, and I'm just going to throw a percentage out there, but it's pretty high percentage. 90% of the time, if you save that seed, it will revert back to one of the parent plants. So you may not get, or you will not get what you grew the year before. You'll end up getting a variation of it to some extent. So it has to go through multiple generations before it's actually stabilized into the character traits of it. Whereas an heirloom seed, it's been saved. It's been reused year after year after year. I think the cutoff date was like the 1950s, to be exact, in case you're listening to this in the future. And so when you save that seed, you get what you saved. You know, if I grew, pick an heirloom, you know, a Brandywine tomato, you're going to get a Brandywine tomato the next year. But they're not known to be as, and there's huge air quotes around this, disease resistant, different heat tolerances, cold tolerances, stuff like that. So there is kind of the big question about that. And it comes into question when you start talking about tolerances is like the king of the North pepper. You know, that's like a big one where it's like when you live farther up north, a lot of people will grow those because it's supposed to be able to grow in cooler temperatures. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So as far as I go, I in the past have been all heirloom. And after struggling quite a bit through some crops, and some crops not as much, mm-hmm. I've gone into where like I grow heirlooms the majority if I want to save the seed. And if I feel like going through the trouble of saving the seed for that certain crop. Where do you stand on that?
There is a time where, for those that are going to go back and listen to every single episode, as in binging us, thank you. You're going to hear me say on one episode in 1 year about how I was transitioning to buying heirlooms for the purpose of seed saving. And I didn't do that. I don't even think I did it in those next couple of months. And it's not even on the 3-year plan because sometimes it takes me 3 years to do a thing. I am driven by what I want now and whether it's heirloom or not. Some of the things that I've enjoyed growing have been heirloom. Like I buy the seed, kind of hard stop now.
Yeah.
My curiosity, desire, interest have overwhelmingly outweighed the concept of, oh, I could save that seed. I think there was something about kind of the lifespan of the seed, you know, and germination rates that maybe swayed me a little bit, you know. So yeah.
Yeah, I tried to do it with carrots one year. I tried to save carrot seeds. Epic fail, bro. Epic fail. I don't even know what the seed looked like. I mean, I know what a carrot seed looks like, but like when I got the plant and I went to go harvest it, like I don't even know how I would plant the seed. Like it just was extremely complicated. So I moved on from it. Tomatoes is another one that for years I have been trying, like, oh, okay, only heirloom. This is how it's going to be. And then this year I started dabbling a little bit with, determinate versus indeterminate versus hybrid versus heirloom. And I'm actually on the hunt for a good determinate heirloom seed because I do want to save my tomato seeds every year. But there's other stuff too that like cabbages, for instance. Like I don't care about saving cabbage seeds. Part reason, and I don't really want to say this out loud in case there's a seed provider listening to us, but because I get so many cabbage seeds in a pack, I don't really need to save them because I can get 3-4 years of cabbage plantings out of a cabbage seed pack. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And because of what we're growing, there's only so many. Well, you more so than me, meaning me more so than you. There are only so many cabbage I'm growing in a season, right? So it would take me probably 5 years to get through my cabbage seeds. Now you toss that into I still can't get cabbage to come out of the grow room. That's a different conversation, but I'm not going to use all of the seeds because guess what? I'm probably going to switch the cabbage variety even. I think that there's something about how should I say this?
Very carefully.
When your socks are knocked off, when something knocks your socks off, then I think you're more inclined to say yes. Not only do I want that, I want to save that, and then I'm chasing it as an heirloom. And I don't know that there's not a whole lot when it comes to variety where I'm like this every single time. Not a lot of vegetables. I was just looking up. Remember, there's this whole debate. There are 3 things in my garden there are 3 things that I thought I planted. So mortgage lifter, brandywine, and then this other tomato. I started the season off thinking that I had planted a mortgage lifter and brandywine, and it was about wait till it produces to figure out which one's which. And I'm online looking. Both brandywine and mortgage lifters are heirlooms. And heirlooms sometimes have a distinct look about them, like the way the bottom of the tomato looks. And so now that the tomato plant is producing, I don't know what the heck it is. Right? I still don't know what the heck it is, right? I just, assume that it was a mortgage lifter because of the hue, but I'm not sure. It doesn't look like the pictures online. But either way, I look at it and say, I'm not impressed with whatever it is, so I'm not going to try to chase that thing down. And that's more or less I mix my starts up. I was talking to you when I did it. You remember that day? Yeah. I was up potting them and I got them mixed up. Then the third tomato is a tomato that is a heavy producer, but I don't know what the variety is because it's in a brandywine package, but clearly not a brandywine tomato. And I've had this experience 3 or 4 years where I keep one either intentionally or accidentally growing the same tomato. So I said all of that to say, I'm not chasing these varieties. I've talked recently a lot about the pineapple tomato, which is an heirloom as well. I'm a lover of it. If I felt like there was going to be upcoming shortage on pineapple tomatoes, I'd be saving all of the seeds from all of my plants. But I don't feel like that's the case. And it's an heirloom. So again, it'd be true. But I probably say, I don't want to go through the names of them. I probably say there are a handful of specific varieties that I believe in enough to chase. And for everything else, I'm kind of let's give it a try. All these years of growing cucumbers, I still don't have a favorite cucumber.
Yeah, and I am ashamed to admit that I forgot to mention this too, and I'm glad you brought it up. Hybrids are also known for one of the traits that they will put in is uniformity of the fruit or vegetable, whatever, and then also the productivity. So some will just be super productive. And the reason why that came to mind is because heirlooms are kind of known to be funky looking vegetables, in the mindset that of what we perceive from the grocery store vegetable to be. I took my mom, we went to a farmer's market earlier in the season, And she's like, I need to get some tomatoes. And I walked over and I saw some heirloom tomatoes. And I thought to myself, I'm like, she ain't going to eat this. But I grabbed it because it was weird looking. And sure enough, she's like, what is that? And I was like, that's a tomato. She's like, I'm not eating that. And I'm like, Mom, it's just a tomato. Like, let's just eat it. Trust me. It's going to be good. And she ate it. She's like, yeah, it's delicious. It's just a tomato. I'm like, exactly. So that's kind of all of it too. And where I've been falling into, I don't want to call it a trap, but I'm going to go ahead and say it, into the variety trap is for different heat tolerances. Mm-hmm. So you'll have like hot tolerant or cold tolerant vegetables, traits within the seed, because it's not like I'm taking a tomato that is cold tolerant and trying to grow it in freezing temperatures. That's not what I'm trying to do. Mm-hmm. What I'm trying to do is get a cold tolerant vegetable that I can get up and going because and this gets confusing, because it's got a heat tolerant trait. So it won't bolt as fast during the heat, and then I can finish it off in the cool season. That's what I'm trying to do. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's a cold weather vegetable, like a cold weather crop.
Yeah, with a heat tolerance.
Yeah. It's slow to bolt is sometimes how they advertise it.
Yeah, sometimes they advertise it that way. Sometimes they'll call them heat tolerant, which when you read that, though, you think, okay, well, I'm going to plant this lettuce in July. Well, most places, especially around me, like that's not even an option. So it's important to know like when you're going to start your vegetable and what the ultimate requirements are from the maker. When I say the maker, I mean like nature of the vegetable. Yeah, God. And then the tolerance that I've been given it to it because it's a hybrid. And so I'm trying to use them to my advantage to get a jump start on it and then finish it off when it's appropriate. And vice versa, you can get it so you can get like there's the King of the North pepper and stuff like that, which when it gets to be 50 degrees here, that will start to kind of hurt a little bit, and these won't hurt as bad, meaning they will continue to grow to an extent.
So, this is one of those moments. I like to be sure of things when I say them. Otherwise, I like to note that I'm not sure of it, and I'm not sure of what I'm about to say. I believe, now that we talk about it and say it out loud, heat tolerant makes me think I could grow lettuce, in the summer.
Yeah.
Slow to bolt makes me believe, that thing's going to bolt just slower than your other lettuce, right? Frost tolerant. And I'll again use lettuce as the example. It can take a frost. Whereas one of its sister vegetables, like, sister plants, another lettuce is going to just break down. I think you have a video where you were able to show like this is what the leaves look like, and how crystallized they were. It's maybe a season or two ago, and so there is something about a home gardener that's moving fast, that maybe that's growing food for production, but maybe not for profit. That I think this is going to be very presumptuous, but I'm going for it. I think that we're the perfect marketing group because we don't necessarily have time or the interest to prove the thing wrong or right.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like I have a Nevada lettuce and I'm almost certain it's labeled heat tolerant. And I've grown it before in the summer. Like I've harvested lettuce from it like in July or something. Every other year, the lettuce I grow, it's bolted in June for sure. That's the last time I'll have fresh lettuce. And in my mind, it happened one summer,
Yeah.
And the next summer I planted it, and nope, it wasn't the same thing. I even tried to get close to the same time frame that I planted the seeds, sowed the seeds. But in my mind, when I make my garden plan out next year, remember I told you this year I felt like I could have got lettuce a little bit longer, at least should have tried. I feel like I'm going to go to that Nevada lettuce because that thing stuck with me. I have one good year with it, but in my mind, that's the lettuce, right? And because it's not like I'm selling it, so it's not like I need to go to market with Nevada lettuce, so I need to be absolutely sure. It's like, if it doesn't work out next year, I'll probably point to something that, is unrelated to never really was heat tolerant.
Yeah.
It's lucked out that one year.
And I mean, I think if you use it to your advantage, you're good. And this is, I mean, we're talking here, we're not just talking about buying seeds though. You're folding in everything in your toolbox for gardening. So you're talking about succession sowing. You're talking about timing and planning. You're talking about seed starting. I mean, this is a whole thing that you're doing. So for instance, what I'm trying to do is I've got my Brussels sprouts. The back row is heirloom. The next row is heat tolerant, and then the next row is like a disease resistant and heat tolerant to an extent, I believe. So it's curious to see how that's going to unfold amongst itself. You know what I mean? Because this is something that I've struggled with, and that's why I said, well, let me go ahead and try the heat tolerant. So I wanted to try it because I've struggled with it. It's hard to grow in my area. It's known to be difficult. But if I can get to where it's like, yeah, this will work fine, then that's good. But, coming into the fall, depending on when you plant, you may not even need a heat tolerant vegetable. But if I'm going to plant something like a cabbage, and for me, I can do it in the fall pretty much no problem. But in the spring, because it gets hot so fast, I may in fact need to start focusing on a heat tolerant crop there so that I can prolong my harvest. And now I'm combining these techniques, where I go ahead and I plant in my heirloom seeds or whatever I have left over and let them grow. Now, I will say this, and I did notice this year, and I know why you're having trouble starting seeds. I figured it out.
Why I'm having trouble getting off my butt and starting seeds,
No.
or why I'm having trouble with the
Survival
act of the
rates.
seed? Okay.
So I moved and every year I have a hard time starting seeds in the summer for fall. Every year. In the spring, it's not an issue. And I moved my seed shelf into my office or the studio here, whatever you want to call it. And because it's a smaller space, I've noticed that it's a lot warmer in here. It's very warm. And so when I started my seeds, I started heirlooms and heat tolerant. Guess what survived?
I don't want to guess.
The heat tolerant are the only ones that made it. Every single one of the heirlooms died. It's very interesting, and it's noticeably warmer in here. So I'm curious to see, because once I go through the spring, if I don't have any issues, I know that's what it is. So it's definite. I think I'm almost convinced that it's the temperature in my house during that time of year is just not conducive to it growing. You know what I mean?
That's the only thing that makes sense for me right now.
Yeah.
The only thing that makes sense. It's the temperature and or the humidity. Like my house may be more dry than I realize,
Yeah.
And so remember last year, so I got to the point of having success with kale this year and in the winter months, right? So think about I'm not in the basement anymore. My heater is running all the time. It's an upstairs bedroom, smaller space to begin with, to your point with your studio. And I was able to get some kale out. Still wasn't able to get the other brassicas. And then, again, I don't think any of that has to do with variety. But I definitely know for certain it is the gardener or the gardener's house.
Yeah.
With that. But I'm not sure. I mean, obviously all of the other heirlooms died. But I'm not sure if I buy what conditions mean heat tolerant.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the big question. There's nobody, I have not seen a seed yet that says this is what heat tolerant is. Like this is your threshold.
Yeah.
I've seen it for heirlooms, like you have this range, but when it comes to heat tolerance, I've never really seen that. And I'm sure somebody can send something and prove me wrong, and that's fine. I hope they do. But I've never seen that myself. So you have all that. And then it's like this year, for the first time, I grew 2 different varieties of sweet potatoes at the same time. I grew Beauregards and Georgia Jets. And my Beauregards I grew for sweet potato pie. And my Georgia Jets I just grew to eat. And we harvested them yesterday. And I was shocked by the difference in the way they looked. I know the way they taste is different, and then the way they grew. They're totally different. So the Beauregards are like a drier potato, where the Georgia Jets are more moist, which is what I want. Is I want the moist, you bake it, it caramelizes, all that stuff. That's what I'm looking for. But the size difference in the potatoes were different too. And it was a contrast difference in everything about them. So it was interesting to see. And so it's like, David helped me and he's like, well, what are we going to do next year, Daddy? And I was like, you want sweet potato pie? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, you like these other ones? He's like, yeah. And so what I think we're going to do is we're going to try and find a balance in them and then throw in one more variety and then just try and even it out a little bit and see what we can get, So, I want to try the Carolina Ruby sweet potato for obvious reasons. So it's supposed to be one of the moistest sweet potatoes out there. But that's something that you can get to because of the taste, the texture, and stuff like that. And that's how you can change the way you grow and what you're serving your family.
I think that's a really good example. You have to wait so long to get to it, but as far as when it's ready to harvest, sweet potatoes are a really good example of here are stark differences in varieties.
Yeah.
Like we think cabbage, like we think about different cabbage, like clearly there's what's the cabbage you use for kimchi? Like that looks very different than whatever your typical green head or white cabbage is. So yeah. Absolutely get that, Tomatoes, sometimes they look different in color. I think the biggest example that's closest to your sweet potatoes would be a paste tomato and a slicer. They are very much used for different purposes in many people's kitchens. Absolutely, not only just from the shape and, the shape of the tomato. When you cut that tomato open, it's going to be different, no matter what slicer you have when you compare it to a paste tomato. I think that's interesting, but that's much easier to understand why variety is important. But when it comes to some other things, it's not so much, I think I have to go back to see. I'm pretty sure I didn't write it down. There was a variety and find out where this person was. A gardener I saw on YouTube in broccoli, and it was producing broccoli when the summer got warmer. So I don't know if it was described as heat tolerant.
Right.
Or whatever have you, but the gardener made a point to note that they're able to harvest this broccoli further into the summer. And I was like, interesting. I already got like 8 different varieties of broccoli, but, let me see, because that's of interest. Now, this is one of the things that is something to note, and I'm not willing to accept this challenge yet. Earlier on, I don't know remember the vegetable we were talking about. Oh, I could grow this thing, longer, or I could grow it in a different part of the season. I think at one point I'm going to become the gardener that says I'm not trying to beat the system with this vegetable or that vegetable or this vegetable, because that's what we're trying to do.
Preach it, my sister, preach it. Well, and I think it's important that we understand too that we can't just grow anything we want. And, I'm going to keep bringing up the king of the North pepper because it's harder to grow up north. Maybe you shouldn't grow it up north. Maybe you should find something different to grow. And I know it's hard to believe, but not everything grows everywhere. It's like, I did a video recently, about me redoing my pollinator garden and going native flowers. And the reasoning behind that was because they were just generally easier to take care of because they're basically bred for this area. So they know that it's hot. They know that it's dry. They know that there's sand in the soil. They know that it's a long season. They know all of these things. And it's just vegetables are the same way. You know what I mean? I can grow cabbage in my garden all the way up. I can grow it from, hopefully now this is the earliest I've ever planted it, but it's in my garden in late August, and I can grow it all the way up until March easily. But after that, I can't do it. So if I continuously try and plant it over and over, I'm just kind of beating my head up against the wall. Whereas Batavia here, she's harvesting cabbages. When's the last cabbage you harvested?
Tomorrow.
I would kill for that option. You know what I mean?
The last cabbage I pulled out of the garden was July the 25th. I have a couple in the garden and we're in August.
Yeah. So see, that's just totally different. Like there's no heat tolerant cabbage that I can put when I get back to back 96 degree days. You know what I mean? Like if I'm fighting back dehydration every day, you know that these plants that are known to be filled with water are fighting back dehydration. I mean, that's just a common thing. Go ahead.
Give me room for the bell, man. Shoot. You have to get something. I don't have enough sustenance in me to take this there. There's so much there. There's, we have so much access right now to so many things, the interweb and all. Or even if I never went online, I just went to my store, I have so much access. Any store, any like brick and mortar store, retail for groceries, clothing, whatever have you. And I think though, and maybe this is just, again, we're in the season and maybe, this is just what's in my mind. I think one of the things I've learned about kind of others the most is when how should I say this? The reality of Chicago, Illinois, the Midwest, the North, I don't know that I understood it more than I do now when it comes to gardening. Like I looked at it and said, oh my gosh, it's so hot this summer. And without people pointing out and then, people making notes around what they grow in the fall and in the spring only exclusively, without watching your garden, I would not realize kind of where I am sitting as a gardener in Chicago and how moderate our climate is, outside of like Minnesota. And of course your Alaskas and stuff. Like I think we have some of the harshest winters, and in turn, remember, I would think that it's the extreme when it comes to summers. That's not. Yeah. And it's a blessing, absolutely a garden blessing. But I think what it's made me do is it's kind of allowed me to take a beat and kind of reset my reality for other things. Like I was certain I knew what growing in Chicago was like, and this is it. We got this one chance. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but that's not at all. Mm-mm. And without being able to see others' experiences in their gardens, I wouldn't really know the truth of what my garden experience is. Uh-oh. This is what happens when I get hungry? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, you get profound. We're starving Batavia from here on out. That's it.
I know.
No more food. No, it's important because I feel like, maybe as gardeners, we need to wake up and just, come to reality because there's a million seed companies out there. Mm-hmm. And I order the majority of my seeds from seed companies in the Southeast that focus on seeds for the Southeast. So I do order from Johnny Seeds and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And what I notice from them, and this isn't like by any means like a definitive, but sometimes the seeds don't do as well because Johnny Seeds is in Maine. Mm-hmm. A Maine idea of summer versus Southeast, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina idea of heat are two totally different things. I knew a guy, he's from Maine, and when I lived in New England, and he hated it when it got to 75 degrees. Anything over 75 degrees, he was totally miserable. I am living up there and I'm like, please, dear God, let it get to be 90 degrees. Like I'm dying for something warm. You know what I mean? Like it's just two totally different things. And so when we go to be planting in our gardens, we need to be thinking about that because some of these vegetables just don't do well. My Brussels sprouts, like I'm continuously trying to cheat the system with them continuously. And I know that I'm fighting an uphill battle. It's not a secret and I haven't tried to keep it a secret. It's been pretty clear, but it's just kind of one of those things where I want to grow it and I'm going to try and grow it, but I'm going to try and find a way to grow it. And if I can get it, fine. But if I can't, fine. It's just like onions. You can't just grow any onion you want. you got to grow the onion for your area.
But to that point, there are a couple of things that are very strict about that. And if they aren't strict about that, like, you won't get the results that you're looking for at all, if you don't abide by the short day versus long day. But everything else is kind of up for grabs. Like if you get a couple of peppers off the plant, you don't think twice about, about it. So the King of the North, I was, pepper, I think it's interesting. I was poking around and a lot of companies sell that seed. I've grown that pepper too. A lot of companies sell that seed. And the way that people describe it, company by company, differs. You have some companies that absolutely, they describe it as, if you're in the North, some companies describe it as for shorter, cooler seasons, and then some companies don't say anything at all about, the connection to the area that it's basically been bred for. Now, the flip of that, though, I don't know if one thing immediately means the other. I don't know if King of the North, I'm sure it will do well in my garden, but I don't know if that means that it won't do well in yours.
Yeah, I don't know either. The traits
that allow it to do well in mine, is that a disadvantage for yours?
I would assume that it is. That's my assumption, but my mom always said, don't assume, because it makes an ass out of you and me. So there is that, but my assumption is that it would not, and that's why I've never really tried it. Maybe I'll try it next year. Actually, I know I'm not going to, but I just need to focus on something that can take heat. You know what I mean? I'm growing black-eyed peas right now, and everything else is struggling in this heat except for the black-eyed peas and the Seminole pumpkins. They are like thriving and blooming and producing constantly in this heat. And that's something that I need to remember, and that's why I've grown the black-eyed peas year after year since I started, is because they do well in this. Everything else has kind of struggled. I've got multiple types of tomatoes, and the Roma tomato I'm growing this year, for the past couple years, is the Virginia Select. And it's bred for the Southeast. And it really hasn't skipped a beat in the heat. But my Better Boys are struggling. My Geranium Kisses are struggling. My Honest Abe's, that bastard lied, first of all. So there's that. He ain't telling the truth. They're just struggling. You know what I mean? So it's like, once I start seeing it, because the other thing we have to think about is the heat, the wave of the future. Is this something that we're going to have to deal with every year? And if it is, then we need to really start focusing on something different.
Yeah, so I'm really proud of you with your second wave of tomatoes, your second planting. I was like, this is like last week. I'm like, I haven't seen those tomatoes. I'm watching the videos, and then the next video that you published, I'm like, damn, those plants look good. This is August, right? And so I wanted to ask you along these lines, like, those are Romas. I know that you have, like, historically grown, like, that's your go-to, Romas. But did you plant them very intentionally as the second wave?
Yes.
Okay. Versus slicers.
No, well, I'm very intentionally planting them because that's all I could take cuttings from. So next year we're going to switch it up, and I've looked around and found, I'm going to try and grow the red snapper tomato everybody's raving about in the South. So I'm going to try and grow those next year and see how they do. And we're going to be testing a few new things out. Probably going to add a little bit more space to the garden to do it. Big drop. So we'll try that out. But I did that because I knew that it was a producer for me. It was determinant. It was heat tolerant, and it's been a constant in our garden. So I knew how they produce, how they acted, and all that stuff because I've grown them for so many years. That being said, going back to your point earlier, in variety, it's a sauce tomato. It's more meaty. And one thing that we really lacked this year has been slicers. And our Better Boys, they're growing, but they're not ripening because it's so hot. So every time we get a cool spell, a green tomato will come up. And then it'll get hot and it'll sit. And then it'll get cool and then they'll start to ripen. So it's like this thing where we have to wait for it to kind of get, like today's 83 degrees. So hopefully something will start to blush, and then I'll go ahead and pull it when it gets hot again and finish it off in the house and try and keep that plant producing. Whereas the Romas, I don't have to worry about that.
It's an offshoot. This is in August. I was doing a video, like a short or something. Little dogs, man, they are assassins. My neighbor across the street has a little bitty dog. I don't know a lot about dogs, but it's just a little bitty thing. Like, you know, the ones that go yap, yap, yap. And this dog is small enough to get underneath the fence. And she is just scared that, you know what, out of one person walking by. Then she climbed out of under the fence and like crawled up to the next person walking by. Sometimes I feel like a little bitty dog. Yap, yap, yap. So did I talk myself out of my train of thought?
Probably.
Yeah. All right. We can move on.
So yeah, I've done, so when you talk about cucumbers, I did the National Pickling Cucumber one year. Historically, I've done the Boston Pickling. Batavia's waving her hands at me. Go ahead.
No, finish it. I'll come back around.
So I did the National Pickling, tried it 2 years, didn't get a cucumber for 2 years, went back to my Boston Picklings. Not only have I eaten cucumbers all year, the heat zapped them. They looked like they were done. I fed them. I put some fertilizer through the injector, and they've all come back, and they're all producing again. And I was certain. I was so certain they were going to die that I went into a video and I planted more cucumbers underneath them to try and get another harvest. So I may have too many now. I don't know what I'm going to get, but that's something that I need to keep in mind too, is, you know, how that worked. But that National Pickling Cucumber never worked well for me, ever. And so I reverted back, and I'll keep trying different cucumbers. I think a lot of people are growing the Supremos, which are known to be like heavy producing cucumbers, where to the point to where you cannot keep up with the harvest, which I kind of welcome that. You know what I mean? Like, let's see, you know, hold my seltzer water. Let's see if I can get this done. So we're going to try that.
My 2019, 2020 footage to see what I was growing. Hey, a challenge for someone that's listening that's also on Backyard Gardens community garden Facebook page. Please start a post that asks, what's your experience been like for the National Pickling Cucumber? National,
not nationaling.
Yeah, I thought it was wrong when I said it, but I felt like, you know, whoever was the first to get to that post. And again, I'm asking you to do this, but, you know, check to see if there's a post out there already. So not everyone at once. The issue that I have is I secretly or openly rolled my eyes a couple of years ago when you're like, because you're ready to toss something out like this.
Yeah.
When you're like, you know, the heck with the National Pickling Cucumber. And I still had seeds for it. And I think something in me, I think when I looked up, I only had a couple of pickling cucumbers last year. It's called homemade pickling cucumber. And it's, I got them seeds for someone that's local in like the surrounding states. So I bought the seeds there, and it was like, you know, hit or miss, you know, when it comes to the production. This year, somehow when I started planning, I just knew I wanted to do a pickling cucumber. I pulled out National Pickling Cucumber, and bleep results. The results have been bleep, but this other variety I'm growing there has been bad too. So I don't know if it's, a part of me says it could be the soil I'm growing in. I thought it was much better than it was, but I'm going to tell you this, I'm done too. Roll your eyes, because I'm not even going to bother with them anymore.
But when I bought it, it was tried and true. Great. And I tried it for 2 years. So, you know, and I grow pickling cucumbers based on the variety too, because I prefer the crunch of them versus the softness of the longer cucumbers.
Yeah.
So that's why I grow pickling cucumbers. And that's just something that you learn over time. You know, you start to pick up on textures that you care for. You start to pick up on all these different things when you go through your varieties that you want. And I also try to order the majority of my seeds from the same place, generally speaking. Like, I try not to order like a little bit here, a little bit there, like from 10 different places. That's for financial reasons, but also to kind of just keep it real. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So that's where we stand with that. But on that note, we've got to dovetail into this. Go ahead.
Wait, just one last note. zucchini, summer squash is probably one of those things where variety absolutely matters. I've had one more sucky year of summer squash, like probably the suckiest year. If I were being graded on being a good gardener based on my ability to grow squash, like I'm repeating the grade. So somehow, some way I went from like leaving zucchini and summer squash on people's doorsteps to like year 3, year 4. I had 2 zucchini this year, 2.
That's not
it's
good.
Mid-August, 2.
Yeah, I had a fantastic squash and zucchini year, but we'll talk about that in another episode.
Yeah, we'll talk about specifically the varieties you're growing, and we'll put aside whether your weather and my weather matter and impact them. I'm just going to do what you did. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't want to bother with any variables other than what it Ben do, and he was successful. I want to do that next year.
Yeah, well, I tried that, and we're going to do an episode on what we did this year, and I'm also going to try and put together a video about different techniques I tried and how they worked out too. So, but we got to dovetail into this question. This is totally relevant within reason. But it makes sense. But first, I do need to tell you guys about the Planter app. It is a longtime supporter of the show, and we both love using it to plan our gardens. It's got square foot gardening. Everything is drag and drop interface, multiple varieties. I think he's up to like thousands of varieties at this point. Very visual, so it's easy to look at, pleasing to the eye. You can design multiple plans, and what I like to do is I like to go back and look and see each year so I can get my crop rotations right. Tells you when you have a companion plant or a faux planting situation going on, has flowers in it. You can do all kinds of things. It's got growing guides for them. If you put in your zip code, it'll give you the different planting dates for you, and it really just helps you plan your garden out better. And this is exactly what we're talking about in this episode, where this will help you because planning is everything into having a successful garden. So check it out, Planter app. Link is in the description. I'll give you a discount. It is on the app stores for both Google and Apple, and you can also use it on your computer, which I thoroughly like doing too. So bigger screen's always better. But we need to get directly into our gardening question of the day from Spotify. And it's from our episode about protecting your garden from the heat. And let's see here. Bethany writes us and says, "Hi guys, what are your favorite seed catalogs? This was my first year really gardening hard, and I'd like to upgrade from just browsing at the home improvement stores. Thanks, Beth." Excuse me, not Bethany, Beth. So, what's your favorite seed catalog?
I don't have a favorite. They're all pretty. And at this point, I am ordering less from them. It's a part of getting into the spirit of it, to be quite frank. And I'm on mailing list, and so I haven't taken the step to remove myself. Yeah, that's, sorry, I don't have a more...
No, that's a beautiful answer. I hate seed catalogs. They're the worst. And it's funny you said they're pretty, because that's all it is. It's just marketing at its best. And shopping for seeds at the home improvement stores, there's nothing wrong with that at all. I think it's actually a great way to do it. That's how people have been doing it for generations. I mean, go to your local hardware store back in the day and you get it, and now, or your general store, and now you're going to the home improvement store. I don't like them. I don't even know how I got on the list, but I probably get 15 to 20 seed catalogs every year, and it's like a running joke in our house of how much they good. Now, there is a couple that we are going to keep this year that I hope they keep sending, because they'll be good fuel for my smoker for my beehives. So that'll work out pretty good. But otherwise, like, it's antiquated and it's not good. Your seed catalog that people get, I don't think should drive you to the company to buy it from. I think going to the websites, really looking at them and seeing what other people are using and growing from and stuff like that, I think is a much more useful place to be. And there's a reason why Burpee and Ferry Morris don't really put out seed catalogs, because they don't need to.
Yeah, I definitely think so. What's the other companies? Like, you never see an advertisement for them. I think it's just because of the size of those companies and because of their footprints in stores and things of that nature. I believe there's something whimsical about seed catalogs. I believe there is definitely, if you're focused on more small business purchases, I think that there's something to be said about some of the seed catalogs. And small businesses are ranging from, again, not the Burpees and not the Ferry Morrises and so on. That's, I'm just going to go from everyone under them. I'm going to consider a small business for this conversation. I think that some companies take more care in the story they're telling, about some vegetables and some seeds. I think that that's special. I do have an interest. I just don't have time to slow down to really, nurture it. I do have an interest around the story of some seeds and some vegetables and some herbs and so on, and that means that I am going to get back to heirlooms in a different way. But I can't think of the company name, but I've also read from a small business that says a part of the reason why they're able to keep prices low is because they don't do things like produce seed catalogs.
Amen.
So there is this piece of, I definitely think in the early days of focusing on starting things from seed, a lot of things from seed, I think I leaned in more on seed catalogs because it was much easier to see things in my hand versus like scanning and trying to search and like clicking on links on the page.
Yeah.
Because this is when I was expanding my garden and I was really trying to develop, what do I want to grow?
Yeah.
What more do I want to grow beyond what I'm already growing? And I think that helped facilitate things. I think the first seed catalog that is delivered just reminds me of its time, girl.
Yeah.
Well, pull out the lights, pull out the dirt.
The reason why I hate them is because by the time I get the seed catalog, I've had my seeds for a couple months because I hit the fall sales. You know what I'm saying? So I'll get my seeds 50% off. Yeah. And that's for the next year's seeds, not previous year seeds. So they're the good seeds that have already been going. So there you go. No seed catalogs. Stop sending us seed catalogs and stop charging us less or give us more seeds. One of the two.
Speak for yourself. But if the whole will get something cheaper price wise for no seed catalog, sign us up. Yeah, stop it. Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about. I mean, last year I got caught, and this was my fault. I bought some onion seeds at a big box store, and when I opened them, I was like, I got 10 seeds for $2. I didn't read the package and see that they started doing them in micrograms instead of grams. So that was my fault. So, be careful of what you get. But there's a lot of good companies out there. So, anticlimactic answer, but there you go.
Sometimes it's going to be like that.
It is. So, and on that note, everybody, it is that way. And we hope you have your varieties chosen. And you will dig deeper throughout the next couple months and get you some good ones for next year. But until then, we're going to continue to learn to grow and grow for change.
See ya.
Now you know why people feel like celebrating at harvest time.
All over the world, people have feasting and good times when the crops have been gathered in.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for checking out the Backyard Gardens podcast.
If you like what we're doing and you want to continue to support the podcast, head over to our Patreon page to sign up.
You can also make a one-time donation using PayPal. Both of these links are in the description.
With your support, we can continue growing and helping others in their gardens. See ya.
If you guys want some Backyard Gardens gear,
go to the link below and check out our t-shirts, mugs, pint glasses, and other gear.
All purchases go towards helping to support the show, so thank you so much in advance, and we hope you enjoy. We want everybody to have a garden, and we're going to give you a chance to win free seeds every month.
Head over to backyardgardenstv.com and enter your email address to be entered in all of our giveaways.
Good luck.
We want you to be a part of our gardening community. DM us a picture of your garden at Backyard Gardens TV on Instagram, and we will share it with our listeners.